All right, welcome everybody to the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast for the second day. Jeff Erickson here with Nick Whalen. We are brought to you by the good folks over at Vivid Seats, RT Sports, and of course Chalkboard. We're here to break down week one and preview week two. You can tell I'm a little flustered right now. I'm just happy to have my internet back, have everything working right now. So those of you who were with us earlier and had a very abbreviated version of this, thank you for coming back with us. If you're new, well, hey, we're here. Nick, your Jaguars won. My Bengals won, although it felt like a loss.
Yeah.
Week one survivor, I survived. Week one survivor, you survived in your places. We won't talk about our pick'em pools. That was a different story for a different day, because a lot of people got hammered by that apparently this weekend. So let's just start off though with your Jaguars. Big win. But maybe a little empty calories, given the opponent, given how Trevor Lawrence looked.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And we'll try to, hit on all the big recaps, the big fantasy situations, everything you need to know heading into week two. And yeah, Jags took care of business. I was all over the Jags, and I even burned a survivor entry on the Jaguars, Jeff. Not something I would recommend doing very often, but felt really confident that they would take care of business against Carolina. And technically they did that. They survived like an hour and a half weather delay. This game ended up finishing up basically in the late window. I still didn't see a ton of progression, however, from Trevor Lawrence. This was not a great Lawrence game. It was more about the Panthers defense, just looking like the Panthers defense from last year. That was a big part of the reason I was on the Jags. Jacksonville ran for 200 yards in this game. Travis Etienne goes 16 for 143. Basically half of his yards came on a 71-yarder in the second half. But yeah, I mean, Brenton Strange ended up being the Jags' leading receiver. Brian Thomas somewhat salvaged his fantasy day by, running in an 11-yard reverse. But other than that, basically took a zero as a pass catcher. Lawrence missed him a few times, wide open down the field. He had the bad interception, just kind of underthrew Travis Hunter. So that there was quite a bit to unpack from this one fantasy-wise. And of course, Jeff, since the Jaguars won that game on Sunday, we have even more clarity on this backfield. Travis Etienne dominated snaps. He dominated carries. And now Tank Bigsby finds himself a member of the Eagles.
Indeed. To improve their kick return game, apparently, was the line I saw. But hey, that's a pretty hefty price to improve a kick return team. But two picks, 5th and 6th round picks. And then the Jags needed to get, obviously, and they needed a bunch of picks after trading away their first for next year in the Hunter deal there. So interesting to see how that worked out. But all in all, you know what? I think the weather delay had an issue with that one, Nick. That if you saw what happened there with that weather delay, same thing happened to the Eagles-Cowboys. It was a lot of sloppy play afterward.
Yeah, it's never going to be a positive, if you're looking for points, if you're looking for fantasy value, especially when it's that long of a weather delay. And, both teams came out, looked a little bit sloppy after that. The Jaguars had just drove down and put a touchdown on the board before that delay. And Jacksonville, for the most part, kind of picked up where it left off. I thought the Jags absolutely took their feet off the gas in the second half. And, maybe part of that was just kind of knowing you have this game sewn up, not feeling great about Carolina, working their way back into it, and knowing that you have a really difficult schedule over these next 6 or 7 weeks. But really enough about the Jags, Jeff. I don't think anybody needs like 7 minutes of Jags talk. We got Jags-Bengals coming up in week 2. Yes. I think that's going to be a fascinating matchup. I think we're going to find out a lot more about each of these teams. Let me ask you, how did the Cincinnati Bengals win this game? Because every stat that you look at, if you didn't watch this one on Sunday, would tell you that Cleveland should have won.
If you watched this game, you should have seen that Cleveland should have won this game. A missed extra point, a missed field goal that was, by NFL standards, a chip shot, like 35-yarder. We're at peak kicker in the NFL right now. And the Browns, the Niners, who have since cut their kicker, are two of the teams. The Falcons obviously had problems with Younghoe Koo. Missed one badly at the end of the game there and banked another one off the post there with the same sort of movement. It was weird to see that. Jerry Jeudy dropped a 4th down completion that would have been it would have been a 1st down. The 2 interceptions were both balls that initially went off the receiver's hands. This was the Browns handed this game to the Bengals. I mean, they outplayed them in many ways, but definitely this is a game the Browns should be kicking themselves over.
I mean, Cleveland had 11 more first downs. They went 9 of 16 converting third downs. They ran 22 more plays. They had 180 more yards of offense, 4.6 to 2.9 yards per play. it came down to the 2 fluky turnovers, the missed extra point, which of course always matters. Every game that had a missed extra point this weekend, once again, hammered that point home. And then the 36-yard field goal, which came right after a drive where Cincinnati, one of their, I think, 5 3-and-outs in the second half alone, Joe Burrow sacked on 3 straight plays. Cleveland gets it in decent position. They drive down for what should have been the go-ahead score. And then, of course, this no-name kicker misses from 36 yards out. Jeff, yesterday, I went and looked this up. Entering Sunday, teams were 69-3 straight up since 2010. So last 15 years, when they hold an opponent under 150 total yards and they put up at least 300 yards of offense, the Browns accomplished both of those things. It's such a Browns thing to do, to thoroughly dominate a team like that and then still lose.
Indeed it is. And Browns couldn't run the ball. That's the one thing that might change with Quinshon Judkins returning to practice on Wednesday. They may only use 1 week of that roster exemption. We'll see what happens with that. Because Dylan Sampson was okay. Jerome Ford was okay, but they even used Raheem Sanders at the goal line just to screw everybody over. So they did it too. It was frustrating all around there. David Njoku we expected big things from him. He didn't do much. And one of the reasons why is Harold Fannin actually looked really good. The Browns had a good game plan. Kevin Stefanski really dialed up a good game plan. They purposely were taking the air out of the balloon. They were running the play clock down to 2 seconds every time. And they were converting. It was drips and drabs, but it was working. They just couldn't finish in some occasions there. Even their touchdown drive, it was a 4th and 1. It took forever to get in there. So, hey, you know what though? That happens. Now that their reward is they get to face Baltimore, an angry Baltimore team that somehow blew that game. How did the Ravens lose this game? They're up 40-25 with less than 4 minutes left.
I know we almost expect this out of Baltimore at this point, but of all the collapses that we've seen from the Ravens, I think this was pretty easily the most surprising, just how quickly it flipped. If you were watching this game on Sunday night, like we're getting into Derrick Henry high school talk and fans are leaving the stadium. Like at no point did it feel like Buffalo was going to get back into it. And then all of a sudden Derrick Henry fumbles, immediate touchdown for Buffalo. The Baltimore Ravens do what they always do in these situations and run their 3 worst plays in the playbook in succession when all you need to do is pick up a first down to basically salt the game away. Look, I thought Baltimore probably should have considered going for it on that 4th down, instead just live with the result. Like you weren't going to stop Buffalo at that point. I mean, I feel like that was pretty clear. Easier said than done, of course, in the moment. But I mean, so many things have to go wrong to blow a 15-point lead in 4 minutes. And the one that I think wasn't talked about enough was that just no-name special teams guy sliding into the end zone when the ball was sitting there at the 2-yard line. Just walk over and pick it up, man. Walk over and pick it up. You got teammates right there, ready to do it. Slides into the end zone, gives Buffalo a free 35 yards, and you're off and running. One thing I will say, one of the worst individual performances I've ever seen by a cornerback in Jair Alexander. My goodness, beat twice on that final drive, made a tackle that he should not have made, should have let Keon Coleman score, was beat for a really bad pass interference in the first half that handed a touchdown to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you said it on XM earlier today. Like the Ravens are usually good when they pick their spots. They bring in these low-cost veterans, guys who've worn out their welcome somewhere else. Jair Alexander killed the Ravens.
Yeah, absolutely, and so did Owuzie too. They brought in 2 vet guys, and that usually works out to kind of cover their second, third corner. And no, it was terrible. I gotta say, I mean, Jair Alexander hasn't played a whole lot of football lately, right? It's no. I wonder if it's been a while since we've seen that, seen the good version of him. And I wonder, maybe he'll bounce back. The Bills do have a way of making everybody look bad. Josh Allen has a way of making everybody look bad. I'm curious. Do you think this was more Alexander looking bad, or maybe are we seeing maybe a little bit of emergence here on Keon Coleman?
Well, I think that's the big fantasy question coming out of this game is, how real is what we saw from Keon Coleman, who I believe is the wide receiver 2 on the week in PPR, second only to Zay Flowers, by the way, who had the best fantasy game of his career on Sunday night. So it's Flowers, it's Coleman, and it's Quentin Johnston, who I believe are your top 3 fantasy receivers, as we all predicted. Very rough week overall, by the way, for the elite wide receivers in fantasy. I mean, Keon Coleman played 75 snaps. That was by far the most of any Bills receiver. He ran the most routes. He drew the most targets. It did feel like a lot of that work came late in the game. He was the guy that caught the deflected pass in the end zone that felt like it mattered, but didn't really matter that much at the time. So you'd like to see him be a little bit more involved, in what felt like the true meaningful portion of the game before Buffalo stormed back. But I don't know if the Bills can continue with the same trajectory that they had last year, where Mac Hollins ends up leading your team in receiving touchdowns. You have a really reliable, safe option in Khalil Shakir, but he's not a true number one. Like, you drafted Keon Coleman to be that guy, as he develops. So I would like to believe this is real. And, the other thing I would mention as far as the snaps go, it's not looking good for Dalton Kincaid, Jeff. It was outsnapped by Dawson Knox. We saw some Jackson Hawes in there as well, just 4 targets on 32 routes for Dalton Kincaid.
And they kind of foretold that. They said that it is going to be, the snap share was going to be very similar to what it's been in before, where Knox is a lot of those snaps. Kincaid's not a blocker, and that's pretty clear. And when you bring in Josh Palmer to go along with Shakir, who's healthy enough to play and had a good game, and you have Keon Coleman, there's not as much need for Kincaid. If you're going to have 4 players running routes, okay, fine. But then they also have other receivers on this team too. So I can see why it's tough. At least he got the early score, but otherwise rough look for sure. As far as Baltimore goes, I mean, I'm tempted to just say this is a one-off. I mean, they scored 40 points. Derrick Henry was running roughshod. Wow. Lamar looked great. I think they're going to murder death kill Cleveland this upcoming week, despite Cleveland looking better defensively than I think we thought. Despite Baltimore having letdowns in the past, I don't see it happening this time.
I don't either. And I haven't decided where I'm going to go on that game. The number's up to 11.5. I think there's some 12.5s out there as well for week 2. And I mean, what's in the back of my mind is that, the Ravens felt like they blew a game week 1 against Kansas City last year and then turned around and lost straight up as like 9.5 point favorites to the Raiders in week 2. So we've kind of seen this script before. I'm inclined to believe that you would think when something like this happens over and over, much like Cincinnati in week 1, Jeff, like I kept that game off of my betting card. But if I had to take a side, I would have taken Cincy under the idea of there's just no way they can do this again. And then they did it again, so that's going to be in the back of my mind with Baltimore. But not a whole lot fantasy wise on the Ravens. We kind of know what to expect from their premier guys at this point. And I think there's a decent chance this could go down as the best game of the season for Zay Flowers, which is not necessarily a bad thing. 143 and a touchdown to take that.
I was just gonna say, it wouldn't be a shock for any receiver to have that be the best game of the year.
I'm just saying, don't expect this every week.
Right. I hear you on that. Do you want to give a Bengals Jaguars prediction at the end of the show, or do we want to do it now?
Save it for the end.
All right. Save the best for the end. All right. NFL is back. Don't just sit on the couch. Lock in your seat this season with the Vivid Seats app, where you'll score the lowest price tickets guaranteed. That's right. Vivid Seats is introducing their new lowest price guarantee, so you know that you're getting the best deal all season long. Seriously, try to find a cheaper ticket. Good luck. Every rushing yard, every red zone pass, and jaw-dropping play of your favorite team live and in person. And here's the kicker. When you buy with the Vivid Seats app, you rack up rewards and free credits. That's your personal home field advantage. And if that wasn't enough, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code RotoWire, RotoWire. So suit up this NFL season and download the Vivid Seats app to get the best deal in the game with the best prices. Terms, as always, apply. I just used Vivid Seats to get Dodger tickets this summer, so I can vouch for them. It does work well. Got very happy with our seats there. Question, let's talk about a happy occasion here, and a question from Fantasy Meatball. Is the Packers D really good, or the Lions offense that bad? We'll start off with that aspect of that there, because this is a multi-part question, but I wanted to talk Packers here because, hey, they looked amazing on Sunday.
Yeah, to me, this was more about the Packers defense than it was the Lions offense. Now, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, but eye test wise, I have not seen the Packers fly around like that. 3 or 4 guys in on every tackle, felt like constantly pressuring Jared Goff. We haven't seen that in a long time. And I think that's kind of one of the hidden wrinkles of bringing in Micah Parsons. It's not about, all right, can Micah Parsons rack up 17.5 sacks? It's what does he do for the rest of that defensive line? Like, all of a sudden, Rashawn Gary, who was your premier pass rusher, he looks a lot better as a number 2. And Lucas Van Ness is kind of your 2/3. And Devontae Wyatt being able to work on the inside. What Micah Parsons brought in a 45% snap share in week 1, I think was exactly what you wanted to see, exactly the reason you went out and got him if you're Green Bay. I still have concerns about the cornerback group. That's really the only area where the Lions had success. And a lot of that came later in the game. But the two starting corners for the Packers did struggle a little bit. I think Detroit's going to end up being okay. I think we'll look at this as probably somewhat of an anomaly game. It was their lowest yards per play in any game since 2021. Tough spot to begin the year. A team riding high after trading for Parsons. You're on the road at Lambeau. Packers always play well there. So I'm not panicking quite yet on the Detroit Lions. I think they'll be fine. I thought the defense actually looked okay, at least against the run. This was not a great day for Josh Jacobs. And I think a pretty decent bounce back spot in week 2 against Chicago. You're catching a Bears team that might, again, be without both of its starting corners. Confidence could not be lower if you're Chicago based on what we saw last night. So we've already seen that line move up a point and a half since this morning in favor of the Detroit Lions. I look at that as kind of a get back to business as usual spot for the Lions offense.
I could see that. I'm impressed that Parsons was able to do that mostly against Penix too, is the other thing that was really impressive to there. But again, there it wasn't working. The coordination between he and the interior offensive alignment might have been off. Usually the center sets the tone. I think that's the one worry point about the Lions for me is the interior offensive line. I'm worried less about that somehow than I am about the offensive coordinator change. I'm not sure if that's fair or if that's right, but I do worry about that the most. And the lack of run game is what has me saying that. The fact that Gibbs and Montgomery really struggled to get out of the gate there and against the Packers team that you could run against last year.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is the far bigger issue right now. And I know there was a line of thinking out there for week 1 of, okay, if the Lions look bad offensively, that must mean the Bears will look good because it was, in fact, Ben Johnson. And it turned out really both of them didn't look good. I didn't really see much of the Ben Johnson magic sprinkled on the Chicago Bears on Monday night. So I'm inclined to believe that Detroit will get this figured out. I mean, you're returning basically everybody from what might be the best overall skill group in the NFL, at least the best skill group in the NFC. Really tough schedule. You're not going to be able to cruise through like you did last season, but I think we'll look back at this and just kind of look at it as a bumpy start for Detroit, not a sign of things to come.
Indeed. And I definitely agree with that. I want to talk a little Packers Commanders, but first, second part of this super chat question, Ward or Penix in the Scott Fishbowl this week. In the case of Penix, he goes to Minnesota. Pretty tough matchup there. Tennessee is at home against the Rams. Yeah. Also a pretty tough matchup. Rams defense, we haven't talked anything about Rams-Texans really yet, so I want to talk a little bit about them, but I would go Penix. If Drake London doesn't play, then I might change my mind, but even still, I mean, the Tennessee receivers not named Calvin Ridley really leave me nonplussed right now.
I just think even with the injuries at receiver, you just have a lot more wiggle room with Michael Penix. Like for as mobile as Cam Ward is and was at times against Denver this past week, I mean, he ultimately finished with like 4.5 fantasy points in the Scott Fishbowl format. Michael Penix was up over 30. And it wasn't like this was a great game for Penix. He had the yardage, but I think obviously had the rushing touchdown and the one early touchdown to Bijan Robinson, but it was not lighting it up by any means. Now, if there's no London and if there's no Darnell Mooney and you're going up against a Brian Flores defense, that does get a little bit dicey. But I still think, you're looking at kind of the lesser of two evils here, given the injury situation for Atlanta. I would be more comfortable thinking I could get to 15 to 20 points with Michael Penix than thinking I could do that with Cam Ward, because I mean, the Rams defense is not the Broncos, but that's a really fearsome pass rush. That offense looked terrible last week. And you have, I think, pretty easily the biggest coaching mismatch in the NFL in week 2.
Yeah, I could see that. I can absolutely see that way there. You're right. So, and I think Mooney might be back. The Rams the Falcons kind of hinted at this a little bit too with Mooney, that it was a game time decision. He said it was going to be a game time decision. Yeah. Always believe the player when they say they're going to be a game time decision. But other notes from that Falcons-Bucs game, because I was on the under on this one. Turns out being on the under was great on all but 4 games this past week. I was sweating that big though at the end. The missed extra point by Chase McLaughlin actually made me think I was screwed, because I thought that Atlanta was going to kick the field goal. They'd go to overtime, and then the winner in overtime would put it over the total. And I was going to be hosed on that one there. They had 2 shots at the end zone. One of them, it took a really nice play by Antoine Winfield to break up the pass. I know you didn't like the play selection. That was actually going to work though. Yeah. A better receiver holds onto that ball, or maybe a lesser DB doesn't break it up.
Yeah, I think a little bit of both there. And it's hard to fault Atlanta for trying to essentially win the game in regulation, but you have a shaky kicker Nku, who he's made some big kicks. He's missed some big kicks over the years. And I just, instead of taking 2 shots at the end zone with like 20 seconds on the clock, like just try to pick up any amount of yardage. Can you get that field goal into the 30-yard range instead of 44, which look, it's an NFL veteran kicker. You should be able to make a 44-yarder in a dome in front of your home fans. Like maybe that's the bigger issue here. But I thought Atlanta did a really good job like getting into range, and then they got to a certain point and then just started firing away for some reason. And that was with Drake London off the field. Like he wasn't out there for that final drive. So you don't even have your best receiver. You don't have your jump ball guy in that situation. Obviously if they could do it over again, I think you probably play it a little bit more conservatively. But you're right. I mean, they were close to hitting one of those.
Yeah, it was a weird sequence. Bijan not going out of bounds. They had to kind of spike it, burn it down that way. I think all those things kind of added up. The fact that they had Washington as the target on that one play, I think either Mooney or London probably comes down with that. Yeah. We probably have a whole different take on this game as far as that goes. Bucs side, Emeka Egbuka, pretty nice debut for him. We talked a lot about some of these rookies not making a big splash. Well, Emeka Egbuka catching the game-winning touchdown and an earlier touchdown at that. It was nice to see him step up right away. I don't know if his target share goes down when Godwin comes back. It's hard to kind of put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah, I know. And I have plenty of Egbuka. I have probably even more Chris Godwin. I'm a little bit worried about that. It is worth noting Egbuka, for as great as he was only targeted 6 times. Like this was not really the offensive fireworks game that we thought it would be by any means. Atlanta gets off to a hot start, really didn't do a whole lot for the next couple of quarters. Tampa Bay, would move the ball to like midfield. They'd get on the edge of field goal range, and then something would happen. The drive would stall. So I don't think either team came out of this like feeling great about how it went offensively. But for Egbuka to do that on just 6 targets, I thought was really impressive. 8 targets for Mike Evans. Not a huge day for him. Finished with about 10 fantasy points in PPR. And I mean, worth noting that neither team could run the ball. We have offensive line issues on both sides. I think that rang true right away. I mean, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson had 22 carries. None of those went for longer than 6 yards. Yeah,
absolutely. Their best runner, the best run of the day of all the people carrying the ball was Baker Mayfield. Yeah, some of his scrambles there. Speaking of Egbuka, Binks was asking us a question. Offer James Cook for Egbuka. Would you accept? I think absent depth issues at wide receiver, I think this is an auto click for me.
Yeah, probably. It depends who your other running backs are. And it depends if you think the clock is up on Egbuka, once Chris Godwin comes back in week 5 or week 6. I'm with you, Jeff. I think once the genie's out of the bottle, like you're just, especially if he has another explosive week or two in the next few weeks, like it's just going to be really difficult to say, hey, sorry, man, you're the number 3. I think he probably works ahead of Chris Godwin at this point. So yeah, I think if you can make that deal, you probably do it, assuming that you're not just in a massive hole and like starting Caleb Johnson as your RB2.
Yeah, that's right. But Cook is awesome too, though. And I got him on the NFFC primetime draft on Saturday in the 3rd round. I'm happy with that choice. Seeing him involved in the passing game is what I needed to see there. That was nice. Got a touchdown. Could have had a bit more running yards, but again, this was a bonkers game there too. So I would take that deal. I would take Cook for Egbuka, but at the same time, I'm happy. It's a good place to be in there where you have Egbuka in the first place. So
yeah, I mean, and it is worth noting, like the Bills just didn't run the ball a ton on Sunday night, playing from behind. Like Cook carried, they had 15 running back carries and 13 of them went to James Cook.
Yeah, that's a nice ratio. We'll take that there. Not great if you're a Ray Davis owner, but then again, we'll see. Cook should have had 2 TDs, almost scored on that long pass play there too. So that was pretty good. Pretty good showing all around there. Before we talk about the 49ers and their injury woes, quick note from our friends over at RT Sports. The NFL season is here. The best place to play DFS Pick'em is RT Sports. Download the brand new RT Sports Pick'em app right now. Receive your 100% deposit match bonus up to $100 in bonus funds with promo code WIRE100. RT Sports offers unique ways to earn bonus funds, such as every time you share your entry slip on Twitter or X, you get $5 of bonus funds on RT Sports. Or if you sync your bank account, you get bonus funds. Also, RT Sports offers weekly free, quote-unquote, free square options on the app with player lines slashed to 0.5 total yards. Download the RT Sports Pick'em app today and use promo code WIRE100 to get a 100% deposit up to $100 in bonus funds. Thanks to RT Sports. Appreciate their sponsorship. Let's talk a little bit about the 49ers. We got bad news on the Niners. George Kittle on IR now, Nick, meaning minimum 4 games. I have a lot of Kittle. I know you have a lot of Kittle. They may have Jawan Jennings back. They may not have Brock Purdy for this week. It is against the Saints. What do you do here?
Well, luckily we have a clear blueprint, because this happens with the 49ers. It feels like every single season. Like, nobody has more key injuries every single year than the Niners. It is a good time, I guess, to have this happen. Like, you already banked a division win. You're going up against New Orleans. Should be a winnable game. We've already seen that line move a couple points, by the way, in favor of New Orleans, because I think Brock Purdy's status really is up in the air right now.
Yeah.
Like you said, no George Kittle for at least 4 games. Yeah, we got a reasonably positive update on Jawan Jennings. I don't think the shoulder injury is considered too serious. Could still miss time. They went out and brought in a receiver earlier this week in Kendrick Bourne. So you now got Kendrick Bourne, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, just all these cast-offs kind of just filling time right now for the Niners. I look at this as an offense that, hopefully could take off in the way that we think it will later in the season. But for the time being, it's just survive and advance, right? I think it could almost be a little Chiefs-like, where it's just slow things down, lean on the healthy stars that you have, try to win these games 20-17. I mean, that's basically what they had to do last week against Seattle. So I don't know that this is going to be the fantasy goldmine type of offense with an easy schedule that we thought it might be coming into the year. I think they can get there later in the season, but there's going to be some rough weeks, I think, coming up here. With all that said, that this continues to break well for Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah, it does. And of course, CMC is going to get all the targets as well. That was an easy click anyhow, the 4.5 receptions last week. You got to figure, I haven't seen the prop yet for this week. Usually those props come out a little bit later. But you got to figure it's got to be over 5.5 this week for sure. If not higher. But is there anybody to pick up beside, is it just Pearsall and CMC? If Jennings can't play, are you, God, I can't even verbalize it, dude. I was gonna say, are you going to pick up like Kendrick Bourne? But the thing is, the Niners didn't go to any of these other options. MVS just ran decoy routes. Sky Moore was barely on the field. I mean, Jake Tongas, really? I don't think we're going to pick him up.
No, I mean, maybe this is the time that if Brian Robinson or Isaac Arendo are still out there in your league, and they are going to lean so heavily on CMC, maybe this is the time that you invest in the backups. I don't know. I don't really have any interest. It's like if you're starting MVS, like you need, your best case scenario is like 2 for 63 and a touchdown, which I guess ultimately you'll live with. But I think you have better options. And as far as like replacing Kittle goes, I'm not that interested in Tonjes. I'm not that interested in Luke Farrell. I mean, there are plenty of other appealing tight ends who are widely available. So obviously, if you invested a 4th round pick in George Kittle, losing him right away, it's brutal. But I mean, you could go out, you could patchwork this, I think, for the next few weeks. Harold Fannin, Jawan Johnson, Brenton Strange, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, all those guys are out there in most leagues.
Yep. And by the way, this is a good opportunity to kind of illustrate a tool on RotoWire, which you can check out using YouTube, promo code YouTube15. If you go to tools and my players, if you play in a lot of leagues like I do, you can quickly see, okay, where do I have Kittle? Where do I have to replace him? Really important to be able to jump on that in a timely manner. I have a fab run that runs in 10 minutes, actually. Yay to Tuesday Fabs, but that's neither here nor there. But point is, like, I'm going to have to figure out what to do to replace Kittle in a number of different leagues. I can quickly do that using the My Players tool there. Sync your leagues up, go import them into my leagues, and go to My Players. It's a huge time saver as far as that goes. Let's talk a little Seattle side of this game against the Niners. Sam Darnold with a Sam Darnold-like play at the end of the game in that one there with the brush against the pass rusher, which is a fumble. Credit to Nick Bosa for putting the pressure on him there. And the Niners defense did play very well. Seattle team, I'm unenthused about their offense.
Yeah, hard to be enthused. They threw a ton of balls like right at or behind the line of scrimmage. Just, some of those plays that as a fan, you're like, has this ever worked? Why do we continue trying to run this? Some like comical plays that were just blowing up for losses. A case to be made, certainly, that Seattle should have won this game. It was playing out at the same time as Rams-Texans, and both of those games were just hanging in the balance play by play. You had big turnovers in each of those, including this one, an interception by Brock Purdy midway through the fourth quarter. That allowed Seattle to go down and take a 3-point lead. And then just a wild play, where Brock Purdy just whips the ball into the end zone, was completely misplayed by the Seahawks defender. And that ended up being the Tonjes touchdown. And then, of course, the Sam Darnold play of all Sam Darnold plays, the self-offensive lineman fumble that ended up sealing it for San Francisco. I mean, that play, Jeff, happened with 45 seconds left at the San Francisco 16-yard line. I mean, a field goal does you no good if you're Seattle, but they were going to have a couple shots, you would think, at the end zone. But yeah, not a whole lot to be excited about on the Seattle side of things. I mean, I think a lot of people were drafting Zach Charbonnet with the idea that he would eventually kind of unseat Kenneth Walker. It feels like that might have already happened, like kind of similar to what we saw with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason last night, where it's not like they just handed this job to Charbonnet, but he had equal, if not more, opportunity. He certainly looked better when he had those opportunities. Kenneth Walker was not breaking tackles. Charbonnet ended up out-carrying him 12-10, outrushed him 47-20, 3.9 compared to 2.0 yards per carry. And then, passing-wise for Seattle, didn't love the early returns on Cooper Kupp, did almost nothing, had a big drop late in the game. But Jackson Smith and Jigba, man, 9 catches on 13 targets. Nobody had a higher target rate in week 1 than JSN.
Yeah. So it just would like to see a little bit more of them downfield. That's it, like you said earlier there. That's about the only thing that I would change when it comes to JSN. If I had him there, honestly, I'd change the quarterback. I'd turn back time and have Geno Smith still be at the helm. But that's
I mean, Darnold wasn't that bad.
I know.
It's not an upgrade from Geno. He wasn't a disaster, but I don't necessarily feel great about it.
No, and Darnold only got sacked that one time, so it's not even like he was under siege the whole time. But just a meh running game. And Kenneth Walker 10 for 20. That's got to be that's the one that hits a little bit there. And seeing Charbonnet take the goal line carry too was really tough too.
Tough, but not unexpected, man. I mean, there's a reason people were taking him in the 80s and the 70s, even late in drafts.
Yeah, exactly. So we got some injured tight ends, not just Kittle, but also Evan Engram, Brock Bowers. We're going to be checking on. We don't know if they're going to be able to play, especially Bowers on Monday night yet. It's too soon for that one there. He did downplay his knee issue there, but it did cause him to leave the game. I think you won't know at least until Thursday and probably later when it comes to the case of Bowers there, because they play. They're not going to practice until Thursday. Evan Engram with the calf, we'll see about him too.
Yeah, I think Bowers is going to end up being okay here. He said he just kind of banged knees, at some point during the game. Was a little surprising he didn't go back out there. It's not like the Raiders had that game salted away by any means. So something to monitor for sure. He of the three, I mean, Kittle's on IR, so we know he's out. I'm more concerned about Engram potentially missing time than I am Brock Bowers. But again, there are other options out there. It's a terrible week if you need a running back. Receivers, you could squint and you could find some guys that you might like, but I think there are plenty of plug and play, 1 or 2 week type of tight ends who you could feel okay about.
100% agree. I think Juwan Johnson's the guy I'd probably target more than anyone. I like Harold Fannin. We talked about him as well as a possible pickup, but Johnson, it's a very narrow tree such that it is in New Orleans. It's Olave, it's Johnson, it's Shaheed, and there's really not much else out there on that team. And obviously throwing to Kamara is another one there, but Johnson was their go-to in the stretch. He had a number of third down conversions. He was targeted on that end zone play. Good defensive play to break that up, I thought. Great throw by the Rattler.
Man.
He's only going to be the Rattler to me. I'm never going to call him just Rattler until, we'll see. We'll see if things turn around. I actually have him in like a super flex league as my bye week guy, and I'm hoping he hangs on for that, but we'll see about that. Want to talk a little Rams and Texans here. This was another one that Houston was driving, and when the game finishing fumble happened, they needed a touchdown too, though. And this is another one where it's far from guaranteed that they were going to be able to punch it in. The real takeaway for me though is I'm bummed out. I'm really bummed out if I have if I have any components of the Houston passing game. CJ Stroud and even Nico, I'm a little bit worried about. It could turn around for sure, but I'm bummed out.
Yeah, very weird game. Not surprised that this was low scoring. This was one of my favorite plays of the week. I mean, I could not have been more wrong on the under 38.5 for Jets Steelers, which I think was sunk like 6 minutes into the game. But I know you and I both like this as a lower scoring game, and I think we saw the reasons for that, right? Like the liability that is the Texans offensive line, the strength that is the Rams defensive line, the strength that is the Texans defensive line. The one thing we did not see, though, it was much rust from Matthew Stafford. He's not the reason the Rams only scored 14 points. I thought he actually looked pretty good. And, the Rams kind of went with more of a, ball control type of offense. Ended up being fairly even, in terms of time of possession, in terms of plays run. But, the Rams were okay, settling for some of these shorter plays, trying to prolong drives with Kyren Williams. Puka Nacua, despite leaving the game with a bloodied face, still goes 10 for 130 on 11 targets. Devontae Adams, 4 for 51. A little bit disappointing. Made some really tough catches, though. You can see that connection, I think, is already there with Stafford. But Nico Collins, man, I mean, I'm certainly not panicking. Love Nico Collins. I think this was a really tough matchup for Houston right away with that offensive line. But a number of big-time receivers to finish with single-digit fantasy points this week. Brian Thomas, Devontae Adams, Collins, Chase, Higgins, St. Brown, Hill, Waddle, Ridley, Jameson Williams, Pickens, Brown, McLaurin, Golden. The list goes on, man. It was a very, very strange and mostly disappointing week for receivers.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that one there. And they actually ran the ball okay. Nick Chubb, 13 for 60. He was fine, actually, believe it or not. I think Nico will be fine eventually, but I'm just worried more about Stroud, I guess, taking something beautiful and ruining him because this offensive line can't protect him. The 3 sacks for 37 yards, too. It wasn't like little baby sacks. All of them were like big sacks. That just kills drives, too. So that was frustrating a little bit there. So Tampa Bay goes to Houston. I think this is kind of low-key and a very interesting game because Houston's defense actually played pretty well. They got to Stafford in their own right there. I think there's a chance that Houston I still like Houston a little bit on this one here, but it's because I'm not overly thrilled with how Tampa played. I think they did well to get by. I think that Houston bounces back at home a little bit.
I haven't decided on this one. I think this is going to be my Nick Whalen stay away of the week.
Okay.
In my picks article because of what you just said. I think most people will look at Tampa Bay and say, "Oh, they beat a pretty good Atlanta team," but it was a little bit ugly offensively. You're not getting Wirfs back this week. I think this pass rush is going to be a lot more of an issue than the Falcons pass rush was, which wasn't terrible. It was improved, but we still didn't really see the immediate dividends on those 2 first-round picks. So I think this is another lower-scoring game, to be honest. We're so used to Tampa Bay, especially just playing all these games in the high 20s and the 30s. But early on, when they're not at full strength, no Godwin, no Wirfs, no McMillan, I think this could be another kind of grind type of game between these two.
I agree. Got another super chat question. D-Dub asks, one bench spot, wait on Likely or go after Fannin?
Ooh.
I'm going after Fannin. And I think there's twofold reasons. I don't think Likely ascends as much as people are wanting it to happen just because he's not a great run blocker. And this Baltimore offense works better when they're pounding the ball with Derrick Henry. I don't see Baltimore being a seller at the trade deadline. So I don't think Mark Andrews gets sold off or anything like that. Point is, it takes a Mark Andrews injury for me to get really excited about Likely for the rest of this season, let alone my concerns about Likely being at full capacity. So I'll take the bird in hand and go with Fannin.
This is so tough because I love Isaiah Likely. I'm holding him in a bunch of leagues. It is worth noting he had that huge game week 1 against Kansas City. After that, only had one game where he had more than 5 targets the rest of the year. So I guess it depends on what spot you're in. Like, do you need to make a run? Are you looking at week 1 and saying, "Oh boy, I might be in some trouble here"? In that case, maybe you chance it on Fannin. It was a really good matchup in week 1. I know the Browns didn't score that many points, but they put up a ton of yardage. The Bengals were a terrible defense against tight ends last year. So my concern with Fannin is that by the time he, kind of continues to settle in, and they used him plenty alongside David Njoku, right? And he was out targeted David Njoku in week 1. I think both of those guys could kind of eat together. The question is when you start facing really good defenses, what if Joe Flacco loses the starting job? I don't think he's starting all 17 games. There are a ton of variables right now with Fannin. And I will say one that could work in his favor is they could trade David Njoku. Expiring contract. It would make a ton of sense to get off of him mid-season. So it's going to take some cojones, to put your faith in Harold Fannin after one NFL game against a bad defense. But final verdict for me would be I would slightly lean toward Isaiah Likely because I just want pieces of the Ravens offense, but not going to fault anybody for jumping on Fannin. And it's not like he came out of nowhere, Jeff. Like we've been hearing whispers about him for months out of Browns camp.
Yeah, exactly. That they design plays specifically for Fannin in mind. I always like hearing that. when I'm trying to look at I think that this is one of those weird teams that, hey, because they don't have too much help at wideout, 2 tight ends can be supported in this offense, at least under Flacco. So that's why I'm going Fannin. I get that it's not a slam dunk though at the same time there. All right. We are also brought to you by Chalkboard. Cash in on your NFL picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite stats, to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering the daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports. Now available in 30 plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTONFL. That's ROTONFL to get $20 free with no deposit required. Thanks to Chalkboard for their sponsorship. Nick, we got a couple more games to talk about. Let's talk about last night. Let's talk about the Monday night game a little bit more. We opened the XM show talking about it. Mm-hmm. I think this is just a coaching tour de force by the Minnesota Vikings adjusting in the second half, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think Brian Flores dialed up a lot of different things late. Kevin O'Connell dialed up some good plays late, but I also got McCarthy a little bit of confidence, and that worked. I think Minnesota could be a force to be reckoned with.
I need to see more. More. I came out of this game, I think, if you're looking at this from like the perspective of the Packers or the Lions or any other NFC contenders, feeling worse about both of these two teams. And maybe I'll be wrong on that. I mean, the fourth quarter was impressive. I'll give you that. But the first 3 quarters were very unimpressive from JJ McCarthy. I thought they had to coach around him. I thought the Bears kind of jumped on that. The Bears are still the Bears. I think that's what we learned, right? Like there was a moment where it looked like they were going to run away with this game. They're deep in Minnesota territory. You get that questionable holding call. You get the intentional grounding on Caleb Williams, and all of a sudden the game completely flips. And it wasn't quite, Baltimore Buffalo levels, but it was getting to the point where you felt like, all right, let's pack it up. We'll see what JJ McCarthy can do in week 2. He's just maybe not going to be the guy. He's not ready. And it turned out that the Bears were the team that, much like we've seen the last, decade from Chicago, like when things go bad, they have no way to stop it from going badly. Yeah. And I don't know, man, I thought we would see a little bit more, I guess, control from Ben Johnson in this game. Like tell me if I'm wrong. This just looked like last year's Bears. Like I know Caleb Williams, made a couple nice scripted throws early on. He started 10 for 10, but missed the throws that he needed to make. The wide open one to DJ Moore in the corner, that was awful. And the scrambling was really impressive. I think that was probably the biggest positive from Caleb Williams, but a lot of that was off script, right? Like if you're Ben Johnson, it's like, yeah, that's nice to have in your back pocket. You're not necessarily dialing up those kind of plays for Caleb Williams. And I still saw a frantic quarterback, a quarterback who couldn't make the easy throws, a guy who's kind of off platform. Like when he missed DJ Moore, you see him looking to the left, his body's facing left. And then at the last second, he tries to whip it. There are still mechanical issues there. I'm just a little bit surprised. I'm surprised that the Bears weren't a little bit more buttoned up, I guess, offensively.
And yeah, I think you said it right. When things go bad, they kind of spiral out of control. 12 penalties, 127 yards. I thought that was something that jumped out to me as well. And this started in the second quarter. A couple of drives were scuttled by penalties. There was a drive late in the third quarter that also was pivotal. You focused on that, rightly so. I think that was also a big issue there where things went bad. And they did well to get back in a field goal position, but it's a 50-yard field goal. So it's not like the Bears do not employ peak kicker. They employ disaster kicker. So
right. And it's the Bears. That's what's going to happen. You're not going to make that field goal. And the defense completely crumbled. The defense, which I thought did a great job getting after McCarthy, pressuring him, forcing the pick six, just totally crumbled. McCarthy's just walking down the field, and it was shocking to see because of how bad he was early on, that all of a sudden he did have that in him deep down. And it is worth noting, the Bears were without their 2 starting corners. I think that definitely mattered. Having Tyreek Stevenson having to operate as your number 1 guy, best known for, taunting the fans before the Hail Mary. That's not ideal. But again, I was shocked. I thought we would see a tangible, this looks like a Ben Johnson team. This is the Ben Johnson difference for the Bears. And we didn't see it. And even down to that, that final drive where, I'm sitting there watching this game like, okay, you're kicking this out of bounds, right? Or you're trying the onside.
Oh,
No, they just kick it deep. And Ben Johnson, I guess, quote unquote, to his credit, did say, well, he basically blamed his kicker. He's like, yeah, we told him to kick it through the end zone. It's a 5-yard difference. Kick it out of bounds. Like, Cairo Santos is not a good kicker. He's not a big leg kicker. Like, I just, these are the details that, I think we were sold on. Like, Ben Johnson's not going to let that happen. He's not Matt Eberflus. It just, I'm just shocked how much it looked like last season. I'm fired up.
I think I'm willing to give it time. These things don't get corrected overnight or even through a training camp in preseason against an elite defense, especially. But yeah, it was very similar. I'm with you on this. I still have reason to hope that it gets better. So in so much that I have hope because I have Caleb Williams in some dynasty leagues. So I need to see him get better. Really, please. Anytime now would be great. Fantasy wise, he actually worked out for us. 58 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, the passing touchdown. Yeah. There were much worse quarterback performances in week 1. And there were much worse quarterback performances in week 1 and 2 last year too. I think that's something we have to keep in mind too, looking at all of this here.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just, I was on the Bears last night, if you can't tell. I'm not a Bears fan, but, I just, these are the games that are not supposed to happen anymore if you're a Bears fan, right? Because you finally have competent coaching. And, I think they punted on 4 straight drives at one point with a missed field goal mixed in there. Just surprising. Very, very surprising that they weren't a little bit more prepared. But you're right on Caleb. I mean, if he's going to run like that on a weekly basis, which I don't know if he will, but if he does, I mean, that really changes things fantasy wise, as far as just giving him that extra floor every week.
Yep, indeed. All right, let's close up with this prediction time. Besides Whalen Erickson Bowl, what game are you looking forward to the most this week?
Really good question. I think there were a lot of obvious answers in week 1. It's like you have to say Bills Ravens, and obviously that lived up to the billing. The games that came to mind for me, Washington Green Bay on Thursday night, I think is going to be really, really good. The kind of sneaky one to me would be that Buccaneers Texans game that we talked about. I think it will be lower scoring, but I think we're going to actually find out a little bit more about both of those teams. Broncos Colts suddenly has a little bit of juice, to be honest. Like, can the Colts follow that up? Is Denver, actually as mistake prone as they were in week 1? Who knows? And then Chargers Raiders is the other one, because I'm curious to see, can LA repeat that kind of performance against what in theory should be a much easier opponent defensively in the Raiders. And then, the Raiders go on the road. They grind out a win against New England. And if you could find a way to win this game at home on Monday Night Football, you move to 2-0. I think then we get to the point where you do look at Vegas as a potential, can they get to 9 wins? Could they sneak in as a playoff team scenario in the AFC? So those are the 3 I would point to.
All right. They did the Raiders, kudos to them. They did win the Delusion Bowl. Huzzah. Yeah. Congrats to them. The Colts won the Variance Bowl. Or the Dolphins might have merely lost too. That was, we can rant on the Dolphins another time here too. I am strangely not crazy excited about Philly KC. Maybe because there's a 2-hour pregame just for this stupid game. But no, sorry, it's not a stupid game. It's a big game. It's a Super Bowl rematch. I get it. The NFL has to do what it does. But you know me, I push back against the hype.
Am I wrong to think that KC might just get stomped here, or am I a prisoner of the moment?
No, you're not you're not alone. You might be wrong, but I'm there with you, brothers in arms on this one here. I think that KC has got some real problems early on. They'll figure a way to overcome it, but it usually, sometimes when they have these issues, it takes a while. But I don't think Worthy plays, and I think that's a big deal. I think that's a really big deal for them. So,
well, and even if he does play, it's like, what version are we getting? It's like, if the guy weighs 165 pounds. Like, you take one hit, or is that shoulder, back to being a liability? Like, I admired, trying to play through it, but I think that could end up almost having diminishing returns long term for Worthy if he were to suffer another injury, and you kind of feel like you have to start him, but he might not be at 100%. One other game quickly on the way out that I'll throw out there. I don't think it's going to be a fun watch, but I think Seattle-Pittsburgh is going to be really, really competitive.
I think it could be. I think it could be as well. The Seattle's defense actually did look good, although it's hard to say because of how many people were missing for the Niners, especially as the game progressed. I'm also looking forward to Buffalo Jets. I love the Jets, actually. We're a compelling product to watch. And that's saying something there. So I'm intrigued to see that and see what sort of come down do the Bills have after such a crazy finish. Is this kind of the look ahead game, even though it's a divisional rival? The Jets have played them tough recently too. I think that could be a fun game. Well, and we'll exit with this. Our teams face each other this week. I need a prediction on the Bengals-Jaguars game.
Bengals 31, Jaguars 21. I think this is the week to hop off the Jags. Fade them while they're hot. That was more about Carolina being really bad. I think the Jags will be able to run the ball a little bit on Cincinnati. But it's almost like the worst case scenario for the Jags that Burrow played like he did in week 1. It's like that's not happening again. That's not happening again. I think,
a true fan.
Yeah, I'm pretty big on the Bengals winning and covering that game.
Bengals 24-23.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how they get it done, but we'll see. And Zach Taylor keeps his job, and that's probably bad in the long run. But yeah, we'll see about that too. Hey, Bengals fan, true Bengals fan as well. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for all the great questions and comments in the forum. Those of you who are streaming with us live, really appreciate that. We'll be back at you again next Tuesday. I'll be back at you tomorrow with a guest from an esteemed guest in our industry. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening. Take care.